Today I'm going to replace this bathroom faucet. I'm not a plumber, and if you follow any guidance in this video, you accept responsibility for the outcome. Replacing a bathroom faucet is not a difficult job. I choose to do this type of work myself because I enjoy doing it, and it does save a few dollars. But before you decide to do this type of work, please be honest with yourself. Do you possess the skills and tools to do this job correctly? Damage from a water leak caused by incorrect work can be significantly more expensive than hiring a plumber to do the faucet replacement. Please wear safety glasses and follow safe work practices if you choose to do a faucet replacement. These are the tools that I'm going to use to do this job. So I need a bucket to catch any of the drainage from taking apart the plumbing lines, some paper towels to dry up any water that comes down. I have a piece of wire, just regular household wire that I use for fishing through things and cleaning them out. I have a large Channellock pliers that's helpful for disassembling drain lines. I have a piece of PVC pipe there that I made a special tool out of that I'll demonstrate later. I have some adjustable wrenches in case I need those. I have the correct size wrenches for the water lines, which is a 5/8 inch for the 3/8 inch line and a 7/8 inch wrench for the 1/2 inch line. Also have a pliers, a vice grips, and then screwdriver. That's actually a cotter pin removal tool, and that's actually a fastener removal tool. I use those just trying to clean things out. When I take all this apart, we want to clean any drain lines that we can while we're at the job. And then to clean the sink itself, when we pull the faucet off, I have a toothbrush and a sponge. I may not use all of these tools. For example, if the drain lines come apart by hand, the large Channellock pliers won't be needed. But this is the set of tools that in general may be needed for this type of job. So the vanity's emptied out, so I have room to work. And since I am replacing the drain in the bottom of the sink, I need to take all of the drain lines here off anyway, which is handy because that gives me more room to work on the supply lines in the back. The first thing that we need to do is we need to turn off the supply lines. These particular shutoff valves are press-on fittings, and I found with working on other sinks in this house that if you move these very much, they tend to leak. So these are shapes you can put a wrench on. I recommend if you have these types of fittings, you hold this in place when you turn them off so that it doesn't spin, and you could possibly develop a leak if it does spin. So with a bucket underneath the drain line to catch any water that comes out, I'm going to take off the trap at the bottom of the drain. So here I've removed the plastic drain lines. I really wouldn't have had to remove this drain line in the back, but I do that. It's easy to take off, and it just gives me more room to work. And you'll notice that I've shoved a paper towel in that. Once you take the trap off and there isn't water in there, there's nothing keeping the sewer gases from coming out of that pipe. Now, I don't plan to have this apart very long, and I probably wouldn't have to do that, but I prefer to block it anyway, just to keep anything from coming out of it. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the drain out of the bottom of the sink bowl. And the first thing I'm going to do that is to get this out, there's an interlocking piece that comes across the back, and that's moved by the drain stop here. So we're going to go underneath and we're going to remove that. That'll let us take that out. This is the part that I'm talking about, that horizontal bar that goes across and goes into the drain line. That's what moves the stopper up and down, and that bar goes into the base of the stopper if it's assembled correctly, and you can't pull it out until you take that bar out. So we're going to remove that. It's actually easiest to see how this all works once it's disassembled. So this is the drain stop that you would have on the top of the sink, and it connects to a bar that connects to this rod that goes into the drain line, and that pops this up and down. So that's how you remove that, and that allows us to go to the next step. The fitting in the bottom of the drain bowl unscrews, but to get enough room or enough play to unscrew that, first we need to loosen this nut so that this pipe is loose and we can push it up a little bit and get a hold of that part that's in the bottom of the sink bowl. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew this. I've unscrewed that nut with a large adjustable wrench, and I pull this rubber grommet down, and that allows this to be free. And if we come to the top of the sink now we can get a hold of this, and this actually unscrews. So I'm going to unscrew that and then move on to the next part. So hopefully here you can see the threads on that and how that screws into the top of that. I'm sure it's difficult to see, but between the top of the bowl and the bottom where the drain connects, there's a recessed area here. And that recessed area has a hole in the front, which is the end of a passage that goes all the way up to the top of the sink to this hole. The top hole protects the sink from overflowing. If the stopper is closed and water fills the bowl up to the top hole, it runs through the passage, through these cutouts in the drain pipe, and down the drain. Sometimes this recessed area and the bottom of the passage gets loaded with gunk, which can prevent the overflow from working properly. So I like to clean this. Another reason to call a plumber is if you're a germaphobe, this is not the job for you. This is where I'll use that length of wire. I'll go in and I'll clean out this overflow that goes down into the drain. Sometimes you can't get all the way through from either side, so you just go through from that side, and then I'll fish the wire down this side. Again, this sink is not used that often. This is really, even though it looks dirty, this is really clean compared to a lot of drains. I'm now going to remove the supply lines going up to the faucet. Before you do this, what I do is I wash my hands very, very thoroughly. There's a lot of nasty stuff in the drain, and the last thing you want to do is transfer any of that into the potable water system. You would get incredibly sick if you did. Since I'm going to be reusing these water lines, I'm not going to disconnect them down here. I am only going to disconnect them up when they connect onto the bottom of the faucet. So I'm going to disconnect them from there and there. Those were 1/2-inch compression fittings. So the correct size wrench to take those off was a 7/8-inch wrench. You can try and do this with an adjustable wrench, but it does require more swearing because there's not a whole lot of room to work in here. This is a scrap piece of 1.25" Schedule 40 PVC pipe. And with a Dremel tool, with a cutoff wheel, or maybe I did it with a saw. I did this a while ago, I don't remember. But I put these 4 slots in here. And I use this tool to remove the faucet. If you go back under here, you'll see that there are those plastic fittings that screw on that actually, they're what tightens the sink, or the faucet to the sink bowl. So I use those slots to get a hold of that, and I turn those out. I've done a couple of these replacements in our house, and so it quickly became obvious that that was the easiest way. The way I first tried to do it was, and it works, but it's harder, is to take an adjustable wrench and set it to the right size and push it up against there vertically, if that makes any sense, and use another adjustable wrench to turn it. So you'd use the sides of the adjustable wrench against those ears that are sticking out, not the way you'd normally use an adjustable wrench. Anyway, it's a lot easier if you make something that fits on those and turns. I'm sure there's a tool you can buy, but if I can make a tool easily and cheaply, I do. Once you've removed those plastic retaining nuts and the washers underneath them, the old faucet just lifts right out of the sink. Before we start installing any of the new hardware, we obviously want to clean up these areas on the sink bowl so that we don't see any dirt. Installation of the new faucet is just going to be the reverse order of the disassembly. So now that this is clean, we can take our brand new faucet and put it in. And we're going to take the new plastic nuts that came with this, crawl underneath, and install those. So I put those nuts finger tight, actually fairly snug, but just as tight as I can with my finger. And then you want to come up and make sure that the sink is positioned, or the faucet is positioned where you want it on the sink. You're always going to have some kind of discoloration or marks from the old faucet. And so I'll typically push a faucet like this front. So it's harder to see if there is anything in the back. The nice thing with this one, it's almost exactly the same shape as the old one. So really the same area is covered. So And just make sure you're comfortable that you have it straight and aligned the way you want it. And then you go underneath and tighten those as snug as you can with a tool. Now, I'm sure you can over tighten those and break things because they are plastic, but you can pull them pretty snug. Regarding my decision to reuse the water lines, this house is 9 years old and it's on municipal water with a pressure regulator, so these lines don't see a great deal of variation in water pressure. They're also decent quality lines, or the braided lines, and this is the first time I'm taking them apart, so I felt reusing them is not a big deal in this situation. If your water lines are cheap looking or you've taken them apart a couple of times, you should seriously consider replacing the lines. It's cheap insurance against a lot of water damage that could be quite expensive. This is the drain assembly that came with the new faucet. So this is a pop-up style, so there's no lever on the back of the faucet to make it work. I've installed this in a few of our other sinks. It works very well. I was a little nervous at first because it's an all plastic unit, but that's the way things are made today. There is a rubber washer that goes between this and the sink bowl, and then there's a rubber washer on the bottom that goes against the bottom of the sink bowl, and it's tightened up with this large nut. When I put these in, and I think it recommends it in the directions as well, I use a very liberal amount of silicone caulk, clear silicone, just to make sure that nothing leaks, even though the drain system isn't under pressure, but still a bummer if that leaks. Even though that rubber washer goes up against that very smooth plastic piece there, probably would never leak, but I like to put just a real thin amount of silicone on that as well. And then of course you want to put silicone on the sink base before you put this in. And when you put it in, I like to turn these, there's two cutouts for the overflow. I like to put them front and back since overflow is in the front, and I like to be able, if I need to ever go through this and try and fish something through, I like to be able to go straight through and hopefully through that opening in the drain. Under the sink, I like to put a real generous amount of silicone caulk on the bottom of the sink. Then that thick rubber washer goes kind of the conical side up, and then screw on this large nut, and then we'll tighten it all up. So holding the drain pipe, I tighten that as tight as I possibly can using my hands and just gripping this because it's a pretty large plastic nut. And then these sinks, cast sinks, they're not real precision. I like to fill any gap that remains with silicone caulk just to make sure there's no leaks. This part is more of a personal preference thing because with these plastic drains, there's a lot of thickness to this flange. And to me, it's a gap where dirt can get in. So I try and put some silicone caulk in there and fill that in as much as I can. It's not easy to get it perfect, but you can get it much better so there's not such a big gap. And then you will see there's some residual silicone on the sink bowl, but when it dries, that comes off very easily. Okay, when reassembling this, I don't typically cut the down tube coming off of this. And so I try and make sure that these tubes all fit well. Now when I test fit this, it's very hard to see, but this down tube, it has some printing that's raised on it. And that's something that's not going to seal real well. So I only slide this up to beneath that. But when I do that, I try and reinstall this. Now you can see that I've got a gap here. So I'm going to take this down to my workshop and I'm going to mark this and I'm going to cut, I don't know, inch or two, inch and a half maybe off of here so that this fits together without having to push this so far up on this tube that it's on top of that raised lettering. Disgusting job, but when I take a trap like this apart, I always take it down to a utility tub and I take a screwdriver and run it underwater and scrape the worst of the gunk out of it just so that they flow better. Also, this is from when the home was built. Someone cut this, and I don't know if you can see, there's a lot of really rough parts on this, especially this one. There's a lot of plastic hanging off, and that just catches hair and debris. So when I cut these, I'll typically clean them up a little bit so there isn't plastic debris hanging on the side like that. These cut extremely easily with a hacksaw, and then I use just a sharp utility knife. I just rake that along the edge to clean it up. So there's the cut I made. Doesn't have to be straight, but I do like to clean up the edges, like I said. And this one I didn't cut, but I took the cut that they made and I cleaned up the edges on that so it doesn't catch a lot of debris. If you're unfamiliar with these plastic drain pipes, they just have a rubber compression ring, and when you tighten it down with this piece, it just compresses it against the other so it doesn't leak. Again, there's no pressure in these, so they don't typically leak. I like to put these together with a little bit of petroleum jelly. I'll put it on that inside of that rubber ring. You have to be careful with petroleum jelly. I've read that with some washers it can break them down. I've never found that to be the case with these. This has been in my workshop since, you can kind of tell, since the Cold War, but it comes in handy. So now everything is reassembled. I've turned the water supply back on. I tighten these as tight as I possibly can with my hands. One of the tools that I showed at the beginning of this video was a large Channellock pliers. I didn't use that. I just use that if I can't get one of these apart. I don't like to tighten these with the Channellocks. I don't think they need to be that tight. If you just make them as tight as you possibly can by hand, they should not leak. So now we're going to try the sink. Okay, so with both hot and cold on, we're letting that run. And then we're going to check underneath to see if we have any leaks, if we have to tighten anything up or change anything in the drain system. The water's been running for a few minutes and we have absolutely no leaks in the drain line, so we're good with that. I'd pointed out earlier that these shutoff valves are the press-on type of valves. I really dislike those. They tend to leak if you mess with them at all. And in fact, both of these are dripping a little bit. If you move them around, you can find a spot where the drip is very, very little. If it's dripping extremely slowly, a lot of times they'll stop in a day or two. It'll plug itself up. Maybe not the best advice, but I've done that. If they're leaking quite a bit, and I may be doing it with one of these, this one's leaking quite a bit, I'll replace it with a compression type shutoff valve. And if I do that, I'll add that to the end of this video. The other thing that I highly recommend whenever I do a job like this, I leave, even if nothing's dripping, I leave a bucket under here for a day or two just to make sure that nothing drips. And once I have 24, 48 hours with a perfectly dry bucket underneath all this, then I trust it. One other test you can do to check to make sure that the drain is working properly is fill up the basin, let it run until it's going through the overflow. And then pop it open and come down. And that's going to put as much water through this pipe as it'll ever see. And we check, make sure the whole time that that's draining, and I can hear that that's done draining. And again, we have no leaks, so we're good. I ordered a highly rated shutoff valve that attaches to the 1/2-inch copper pipe with a compression fitting from Amazon. And I'll show you, I say compression fitting. The way this works is that there's a ferrule that slides on the 1/2-inch copper pipe, and then that gets compressed on the copper pipe when you tighten this up. The interesting thing that happened was that by the time this arrived, the press-on shutoff valve had stopped dripping. So I'm not going to mess with something that's working, so you're not going to see me install this, but I will keep this in my inventory, and if I ever have a problem with one of those, I will replace it with this and I will post a video. I hope you found this video where we replaced this old faucet with this new faucet helpful. And if you did, please like this video and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.